The biting wind whipped strands of Su Xiaoxiao's hair across her face, a stinging distraction from the knot of unease twisting in her stomach. The campus, usually a comforting haven of bustling students and rustling leaves, felt alien, the familiar pathways suddenly imbued with an unsettling stillness. She hadn't been sleeping well. The same dream, a blurry kaleidoscope of shadows and a pair of intense, knowing eyes, haunted her nights, leaving her waking with a lingering sense of both dread and longing. It was absurd. The man in her dreams was a phantom, an enigma. Yet, his presence, intangible as it was, resonated deeper than the tangible reality of Shen Yuchen's increasingly possessive grip on her life. He was waiting for her by the library steps, a bouquet of blood-red roses clutched in his hand, a stark contrast to the pale set of his jaw. "Xiao Xiao," he began, his voice tight with barely suppressed anger, "we need to talk." Her stomach lurched. This conversation, the inevitable confrontation, had been hanging over her like a guillotine. "Just tell him," a small voice whispered in her mind. "Tell him about the scholarship application, about the possibility of studying abroad." But the words choked in her throat, strangled by the fear of his reaction, of the inevitable accusations of betrayal, of abandoning him. Later, the world swam around her, the vibrant colors of the campus blurring into an indistinct haze. The laughter of her classmates sounded distant, muffled, as if she were hearing them through layers of water. A sickly sweet taste clung to the back of her throat, a taste she hadn't recognized at first, but now, with the rising panic clawing at her chest, she understood. Drugged. The word echoed in her mind, a chilling realization that sent a wave of icy terror through her veins. Shen Yuchen's face, contorted with a rage she had never witnessed before, flashed before her eyes. He wouldn't, she tried to reason with herself, but the insidious fog clouding her thoughts offered no comfort, no logical explanations. "I've been drugged," she managed to gasp, her voice barely a whisper, clutching at the arm of a passing student. "Help me." But the words seemed to dissolve into the air, swallowed by the encroaching darkness. Panic, raw and primal, seized her as she stumbled blindly through the throngs of students, each face a mask of indifference, oblivious to the terror consuming her. "Chase me," she pleaded, her voice cracking, to a young man hurrying past. The words, nonsensical yet desperate, were her last coherent thought before the world plunged into black. She woke to the sterile scent of antiseptic and the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor. Disoriented, she struggled to piece together the fragmented memories of the previous night, the chilling realization of being drugged, the desperate plea for help. A nurse, her face etched with professional concern, appeared beside her bed. "You're lucky, Miss Sue. A young man brought you in just in time." A young man? The image of a shadowy figure, a sense of strength and protectiveness, flickered at the edge of her consciousness. Who was he? Days turned into weeks, each one a blur of doctor's appointments, hushed whispers, and the growing weight of a secret she carried within her. The pregnancy, confirmed with undeniable certainty, was a shocking revelation, a consequence of a night she couldn't fully recall. The man in her dreams, once a fleeting phantom, now held a tangible connection to her waking life, the father of her unborn children, a mystery she was desperate to unravel. Meanwhile, the tendrils of the Shen family's influence tightened around her, their concern for her well-being a thinly veiled mask for their desire to control the situation, to protect their reputation. Shen Yuchen, initially consumed by rage and accusations, now oscillated between guilt and a desperate attempt to reclaim his position in her life. His apologies felt hollow, his promises empty, each word tinged with the bitterness of his bruised ego. In the opulent confines of the Fu family mansion, Xiao Xiyu paced restlessly, her manicured nails digging into the palms of her hands. Fu Jihan's increasing distance, his preoccupation with a seemingly insignificant college student, gnawed at her composure. Her carefully constructed plans, her meticulous efforts to secure her position within the Fu family, were crumbling before her eyes. Su Xiao, she seethed, the name a bitter taste on her tongue. She will not win. Her mind raced, calculating, plotting, weaving a web of deceit designed to eliminate the obstacle standing in her path. Fu Jihan sat alone in his study, the flickering light of the fireplace casting dancing shadows on the walls. The news of Su Xiaoxiao's pregnancy had struck him with the force of a physical blow. Quadruplets. The sheer improbability of it, coupled with the unsettling circumstances surrounding her drugging, ignited a firestorm of emotions within him: protectiveness, anger, and a strange sense of recognition. The pieces of the puzzle were scattered, fragmented, yet he felt an undeniable pull towards Xiao, a connection that transcended logic and reason. His mother's words echoed in his ears, a constant refrain of warnings and admonishments. She's just after your money, Jihan. Don't be fooled by her innocent act. He dismissed her concerns with a wave of his hand, his instincts screaming against the accusations. There was something more to Xiao, a strength, a resilience that resonated with him, a truth hidden beneath the layers of vulnerability. The truth, he knew, lay buried beneath a carefully constructed facade, a conspiracy woven with threads of jealousy, ambition, and betrayal. His gaze fell upon a framed photograph on his desk, a picture of him taken years ago, a younger, less guarded version of himself. Zhou Yi. Nine Master. The name, a whisper from his past, a reminder of a time when shadows danced with secrets and power was a dangerous game. He had thought those days were behind him, buried beneath the weight of responsibility and the demands of his empire. But Su Xiaoxiao's predicament, the tangled web of deceit surrounding her, had reawakened a part of him he thought long dormant. He would protect her, not only for the sake of his unborn children, but because something in her eyes, in the quiet strength she emanated, mirrored a part of himself he had almost forgotten. He would uncover the truth, expose the conspirators, and reclaim the shadows that had once been his domain. The game was afoot, and Zhou Yi, the Nine Master, was back in play. The aroma of stir-fried garlic and chili hung heavy in the air, a scent that usually brought a flicker of warmth to Xiaoxiao's chest. Today, it tightened her stomach with a knot of unease. She hesitated at the threshold of the small, cluttered kitchen, the linoleum floor cold beneath her worn slippers. Her stepmother, Mei Lan, stood hunched over the gas stove, her back a rigid line of disapproval. Xiao could practically feel the weight of her gaze, even before the inevitable barrage of words began. Su Xiao, you dare to come back. Mei Lan's voice was sharp, laced with an acrid sweetness that always preceded a storm. Xiao swallowed, the metallic tang of anxiety coating her tongue. I came home for dinner, she replied, her voice quieter than she intended. The words felt flimsy, inadequate defenses against the accusation implicit in Mei Lan's tone. Why do I even bother? She thought, the familiar weariness settling in her bones. It's a battlefield, not a home. Dinner? Mei Lan scoffed, turning around with a dramatic flourish. The spatula in her hand dripped with oil, a small, greasy punctuation mark to her words. Where's the lunch you were supposed to bring back? Your father's been waiting, his stomach rumbling. And what have you been doing all day, gallivanting around, spending his hard-earned money? Xiaoxiao's fingers instinctively curled around a strap of her worn canvas bag. The small, plastic container holding her leftover noodles felt suddenly heavy, a symbol of her failure to meet Mei Lan's endless demands. I wasn't feeling well, she mumbled, averting her eyes. The lie felt like a bitter pill, adding another layer of guilt to the already suffocating weight in her chest. Her nausea had indeed returned with a vengeance this afternoon, but the real reason she hadn't brought back lunch was because she'd needed every yuan in her pocket for other things. Things she couldn't possibly explain. Her father, Su Jian, shuffled into the kitchen, his face etched with fatigue. He didn't meet her eyes. Xiao, he began, his voice a tired echo of Mei Lan's accusations, your stepmother works hard. You should be more considerate. Xiao Xiao's jaw clenched. Considerate. The word felt like a mockery. Had anyone ever been considerate of her? Of the constant pressure to excel, the endless chores, the suffocating expectations? She wanted to scream, to tear at the suffocating web of resentment that bound them together. But the years had taught her the futility of resistance. Instead, she simply nodded, her silence a form of surrender. The tension in the small kitchen thickened, heavy and suffocating. The clatter of chopsticks against bowls, usually a comforting sound, now felt like a series of tiny hammer blows against her skull. Xiao Xiao picked at her food, the flavors turning to ash in her mouth. Mei Lan's sharp eyes followed her every move, her silence more oppressive than her words. Just eat, Xiao Xiao told herself, just get through this. Xiao Xiao, Mei Lan's voice, saccharine sweet, cut through the strained silence. Your graduation party is next week. We need to get you a new dress. Something appropriate. Xiao Xiao's hand stilled, her chopsticks hovering over her bowl. The thought of a graduation party, a celebration of her academic achievement, should have filled her with a sense of accomplishment, of pride. Instead, it sent a wave of icy dread through her veins. The image of Mei Lan dragging her through endless shops, forcing her into frilly, uncomfortable dresses that were meant to impress their relatives, not express her own style, filled her with a familiar sense of despair. I have a dress, she murmured, her voice barely audible. A simple, navy blue dress she'd bought herself months ago, a dress that felt comfortable and hers. Mei Lan's laughter, high and brittle, sliced through the air. That old rag? Su Xiao Xiao, you're graduating. You need to look presentable. We can't have you embarrassing us in front of the Shen family. The mention of the Shen family sent a shiver down Xiao Xiao's spine. The wealthy, influential Shen family, with their endless connections and their suffocating expectations. A family that Mei Lan desperately wanted to impress, hoping to climb the social ladder through Xiao Xiao's association with Shen Yuchen. Xiao Xiao's younger half-sister, Su Lily, piped up from her seat at the table, her eyes wide with childish envy. I want a new skirt too, she whined, tugging at Mei Lan's sleeve. Mei Lan patted Lily's head, her smile a stark contrast to the icy glare she directed at Xiao Xiao. Of course, my darling. You deserve a new skirt. Unlike some people, you understand the importance of appearances. The unspoken accusation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Xiao Xiao's stomach churned, the knot of unease tightening into a painful spasm. She pushed her bowl away, unable to stomach another bite. I'm not hungry, she mumbled, her voice choked with a sudden, inexplicable wave of emotion. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor, a jarring sound in the tense silence. I'm going to my room. As she fled the suffocating atmosphere of the kitchen, the echo of Mei Lan's words followed her, sharp and barbed. Appearances Shen family embarrassing the words swirled in her mind, a chaotic storm of guilt, resentment, and a growing sense of dread. She closed the door to her small, cluttered room, the flimsy lock a meager defense against the world outside. Leaning against the cool wood, she closed her eyes, trying to block out the noise, the accusations, the suffocating weight of their expectations. But the silence inside her room was even more deafening, filled with the whispers of her own fears and the growing certainty that something, somewhere, was about to shatter. The antiseptic scent of the hospital clung to Xiao Xiao's clothes, a stark contrast to the turmoil churning within her. Her hands, clasped tightly in her lap, trembled slightly. The crisp white walls of the examination room seemed to close in, amplifying the frantic beat of her heart. Just moments ago, the doctor's words had echoed like a thunderclap, shattering the fragile normalcy of her life. Pregnant. Not just pregnant, but carrying quadruplets. The thought, so unbelievable, so overwhelming, made her head spin. How could this have happened? Her gaze drifted to the blurred figures outside the frosted glass of the door. Fu Jihan's imposing silhouette was unmistakable, his rigid posture radiating tension. Beside him stood Xiao Xiu, a picture of solicitous concern, her hand resting lightly on his arm. A performance, Xiao Xiao thought bitterly, recognizing the subtle triumph in the curve of Xiao Xiu's lips. This news, this impossible news, was a weapon in their hands. The door opened, and the doctor emerged, his expression grave. "May I speak with Mr. Fu privately?" he asked, his gaze flickering towards Xiao Xiao with a mixture of pity and professional detachment. A cold dread washed over her. What were they saying? What secrets were being whispered behind closed doors? Her mind raced, replaying the events of the past few weeks, searching for answers that seemed to slip through her fingers like grains of sand. The stolen moments with Jiu Yi, shrouded in darkness and secrecy, now felt like a fever dream. Could he be the father? The thought was both terrifying and strangely comforting. Jiu Yi, the enigmatic Nine Master, a man of power and mystery, whose touch had ignited a fire within her she hadn't known existed. But wasn't he? The door opened again, and Fu Jihan strode in, his face a mask of controlled fury. Xiao Xiu lingered in the doorway, her eyes fixed on Xiao Xiao with an unsettling intensity. "Is this true?" Fu Jihan demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Xiao Xiao flinched, her heart pounding against her ribs. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She couldn't lie. Not now. Not about something so monumental. "It's true." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Fu Jihan's eyes, dark and unreadable, searched her face, as if trying to decipher a complex code. He seemed to be battling conflicting emotions, his jaw clenched tight, the muscles in his neck corded with tension. Xiao Xiao braced herself for the inevitable accusations, the scorn, the rejection. But then, something unexpected happened. Fu Jihan's expression shifted, the anger replaced by a flicker of confusion. He turned abruptly and walked towards the window, his back to her. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the rhythmic beeping of a machine in the hallway. Xiao Xiao's mind raced, trying to understand his reaction. Was he simply stunned? Or was there something more beneath the surface? "Quadruplets," he murmured, his voice almost lost in the quiet of the room. The word hung in the air, heavy with disbelief. He turned back to her, his gaze now searching, questioning. "Doesn't Jiu Yi have sexual dysfunction?" The question, spoken with such raw vulnerability, caught Xiao Xiao off guard. It was a rumor, whispered in hushed tones within the family, a carefully guarded secret. How did Fu Jihan know? And why did he ask it now, in this moment of utter chaos? Xiao Xiao swallowed, her throat dry. Don't know," she stammered, her mind reeling. The implications of his question were staggering. If Jiu Yi was indeed impotent, then a wave of nausea washed over her, and she closed her eyes, fighting for control. She couldn't think straight. Everything was spinning, a dizzying vortex of secrets and lies. She opened her eyes to find Xiao Xiu standing beside Fu Jihan, her hand now firmly gripping his arm, her expression a mixture of concern and triumph. "Jihan," she said softly, her voice laced with feigned sympathy, "this is a shock. Perhaps we should discuss this later, in private." Her gaze darted toward Xiao Xiao, a veiled threat in her eyes. Xiao Xiao's instincts screamed at her. This woman, this seemingly gentle and caring woman, was dangerous. She was a viper, disguised in silk and pearls. Fu Jihan, however, seemed oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around him. He was lost in his own thoughts, his brow furrowed, his eyes distant. He looked at Xiao Xiao, his gaze intense, searching. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice low and firm. He turned and walked out of the room, followed closely by Xiao Xiu. Xiao Xiao watched them go, a sense of foreboding settling over her. She was alone, trapped in this sterile room, surrounded by the ghosts of secrets and lies. The weight of her pregnancy, the impossible reality of quadruplets, pressed down on her, suffocating her. And then, a new fear, a chilling realization, pierced through the fog of confusion. She wasn't just carrying children. She was carrying secrets. Secrets that could shatter families, destroy empires, and change the course of her life forever. She closed her eyes, drawing a deep, shaky breath. She had to be strong. She had to protect herself. And she had to protect her children. Even if it meant facing the storm alone. The hushed whispers outside the room intensified, punctuated by the sharp click of heels on the polished floor. Xiao Xiao could hear snippets of conversation, fragments of sentences that hinted at accusations, denials, and a growing sense of panic. Her intuition told her that this was just the beginning. The revelation of her pregnancy, the mystery surrounding the father's identity, had ignited a fire that threatened to consume everything in its path. She could feel the walls closing in, the pressure mounting. She was a pawn in a game she didn't understand, a game with stakes higher than she could imagine. And she knew, with a chilling certainty, that the rules were about to change. The muffled sound of a phone ringing sliced through the tense silence. Then, Fu Jihan's voice, sharp and commanding, followed by a hushed silence. The door opened abruptly, and he strode back into the room, his face pale, his eyes blazing with an intensity that made Xiao Xiao's heart skip a beat. He looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "Come with me," he said, his voice low and urgent. "We have much to discuss." The crystal chandeliers cast a kaleidoscopic rain of light across the polished marble floor, reflecting in the champagne flutes held by the city's elite. Shen Yuchen's graduation party was a spectacle, a testament to his family's wealth and influence. But beneath the veneer of celebration, a cold knot tightened in his stomach. Where was she? His gaze swept across the room, searching for the familiar figure that both soothed and irritated him. Su Xiao Xiao. "Yu Chen, congratulations, my boy." A booming voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Mr. Li, his father's business partner, his smile as wide as the Yangtze River. "A bright future ahead, just like your father." Yu Chen forced a smile, the muscles in his face stiff. "Thank you, Mr. Li." He felt a prickle of annoyance. Every conversation, every well-wish seemed to subtly, or not so subtly, circle back to his expected path. The path laid out for him since birth. And now, even Xiao Xiao's absence seemed to be a silent reproach, a disruption to the carefully constructed narrative of his life. "Your lovely girlfriend isn't here." Mrs. Li, draped in jade and diamonds, peered around the room with an almost predatory curiosity. "She's running a bit late," Yu Chen replied, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. He hadn't heard from Xiao Xiao all day. A flicker of unease, something he rarely allowed himself to feel, danced at the edge of his composure. He excused himself, the polite chatter fading behind him as he pulled out his phone. Straight to voicemail. Again. He paced the length of the balcony, the city lights blurring into a meaningless tapestry below. What could be keeping her? He'd sent the car, the dress, everything was meticulously planned. The image of her, radiant in the emerald gown he'd chosen, had been a comforting fantasy all week. Now, it felt like a mocking mirage. His frustration simmered, transforming into a low, persistent anger. She was challenging him, defying him, disrupting his perfect evening. Inside, the party continued, oblivious to his inner turmoil. He could hear snippets of conversation, whispers about Xiao Xiao's absence. His jaw tightened. He wouldn't be made a fool of. Not tonight. Not by her. He dialed her number again, his thumb hovering over the call button, a mixture of anticipation and resentment churning within him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the call connected. "Xiao Xiao, where have you been?" His voice was sharper than he intended, laced with an undercurrent of accusation. A hesitant pause hung in the air, punctuated by the faint sounds of traffic. Yu Chen, her voice, usually bright and melodic, sounded strained, almost brittle. I can't make it." He felt a surge of disbelief, quickly followed by a wave of icy anger. "Can't make it? What are you talking about?" "The car is waiting, the party, I don't have the dress," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper against the backdrop of the city's roar. The absurdity of her excuse struck him like a physical blow. The dress? What happened to the dress? He could feel his control slipping, his carefully constructed composure beginning to crack. It got ruined," she mumbled. He could almost picture her, small and vulnerable, shrinking under his imagined gaze. And yet, a flicker of suspicion ignited within him. Ruined? How? It sounded contrived. Was she avoiding him? Was there someone else? The thought was a venomous seed, taking root in the fertile ground of his insecurities. "Without a dress, I won't go over and embarrass you," Xiao Xiao continued, her voice laced with a strange mixture of defiance and resignation. He scoffed, the sound harsh even to his own ears. "Embarrass me? How could I dislike you for embarrassing me?" The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. He knew it wasn't about the dress. It was about her blatant disregard for his plans, for his reputation. It was about the unsettling feeling that she was slipping away from his grasp. Hours later, after the last guest had departed, after the echoes of forced laughter and polite conversation had faded, Fu Jihan sat alone in his study, the remnants of the party scattered like fallen leaves around him. The knot in his stomach hadn't loosened. It had tightened, constricting his breath, a physical manifestation of the turmoil raging within him. He thought of Xiao Xiao's absence, her strange excuse, the tremor in her voice. Something wasn't right. He closed his eyes, replaying their conversation, searching for clues in the nuances of her tone, the pauses between her words. He'd known her long enough to recognize the subtle shifts in her demeanor, the almost imperceptible signs of distress. And he knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that she was hiding something. He reached for the phone, his fingers dialing a familiar number. "Find her," he commanded, his voice low and dangerous. "Find Su Xiao Xiao." He needed answers. And he wouldn't rest until he had them. The emerald dress lay discarded in a corner of the room, a silent witness to the gathering storm. The air in Shen Yuchen's penthouse shimmered with a forced gaiety. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured rainbows across the polished marble floor, reflecting in the champagne flutes held by elegantly dressed guests. Music pulsed through the room, a superficial veneer over the currents of ambition and intrigue that ran beneath. Xiao Xiao stood near the balcony, the city lights a blurred canvas below. The opulence felt suffocating, each clink of glass, each burst of laughter, a jarring reminder of the precariousness of her situation. He thinks this is a cage, she thought, her gaze drifting toward Shen Yuchen, who was holding court amidst a group of sycophants. But gilded bars are still bars. Xiao Xiu glided towards her, a serpent in designer silk. "Xiao Xiao, you look lost," she purred, her smile not quite reaching her calculating eyes. Lost? Trapped is more accurate, Xiao Xiao thought, her stomach tightening. She offered a polite smile in return. "Just enjoying the view." Xiao Xiu's perfume, cloyingly sweet, hung in the air between them. "Yu Chen is worried about you. You've been so quiet tonight." "He's worried about control, not me," Xiao Xiao corrected silently. She took a slow sip of her sparkling water, the bubbles of fleeting distraction. "A little overwhelmed, that's all." Xiao Xiu's smile tightened, a flicker of something darker crossing her features. You'll get used to this life, Xiao Xiao. Being a Shen comes with certain responsibilities. Xiao Xiao's hand instinctively went to her abdomen, a protective gesture. Responsibilities? Or obligations? The thought left a bitter taste in her mouth. I'm sure I will, she replied, her voice even. Across the room, Shen Yuchen detached himself from his entourage and headed towards them. His eyes, dark and possessive, met hers. He's coming to collect his prize, a cynical voice whispered in her mind. Xiao Xiao, he greeted, his voice smooth as silk. He placed a hand on her arm, a gesture that felt less like affection and more like a brand. Why are you hiding out here? I wasn't hiding, she countered, gently removing his hand. The subtle defiance seemed to irritate him. His jaw tightened. Su Xiao Xiao, what do you think your father means? The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken threats. Xiao Xiao met his gaze, her own hardening. My father is a pawn in your game, she thought. I believe my father wants what's best for me, she said, each word carefully measured. And what is best for you, he pressed, his voice laced with a dangerous edge. Before Xiao Xiao could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. A man, tall and imposing, entered the room. He carried himself with an air of quiet authority that silenced the music and stilled the conversations. Xiao Xiao's breath caught in her throat. Uncle. He moved through the crowd, his gaze settling on Xiao Xiao. Relief, sharp and unexpected, flooded her. He reached her side, his eyes filled with a concern that mirrored her own. Xiao Xiao, he greeted, his voice warm and reassuring. He turned to Shen Yuchen, his demeanor shifting, becoming colder, sharper. Yuchen, a word. Shen Yuchen's face paled slightly. He excused himself, his movements stiff. As they moved away, Qiao Shiyu's hand landed on Xiao Xiao's arm again. This time, the grip was tighter, almost painful. I am your aunt now, she hissed, her voice barely a whisper. Remember that. The venom in her words sent a chill down Xiao Xiao's spine. Aunt? You're nothing but a viper, she thought, her heart pounding. When Shen Yuchen returned, his face was ashen. He looked at Xiao Xiao, a mixture of anger and confusion swirling in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but Xiao Xiao cut him off. Don't bother with the denials, Shen Yuchen, she said, her voice low but steady. I know what you did. His eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing his features. I don't know what you're talking about. Xiao Xiao's gaze didn't waver. I drugged you last time and you ran away, she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. You thought I wouldn't remember. You thought you could control me. The room fell silent. Every eye was on them. Shen Yuchen's face contorted with rage. He reached for her, but her uncle stepped forward, placing himself between them. That's enough, Yuchen, he said, his voice dangerously calm. Xiao Xiao took a deep breath, gathering her courage. She looked directly at Shen Yuchen, her voice clear and unwavering. You're not the only one with connections, Shen Yuchen. Jiu Yi sends his regards. The name hung in the air, a tangible force. Shen Yuchen stumbled back as if struck. His face drained of all color. He looked at Xiao Xiao, then at her uncle, his eyes wide with dawning comprehension. He finally understands, Xiao Xiao thought, a sliver of satisfaction cutting through the fear. The game had changed. The hunter had become the hunted. The fragile mask of civility shattered, revealing the raw, brutal power plays beneath. The party, once a celebration, now felt like a battlefield. And Xiao Xiao, no longer the naive prey, was ready to fight. The car glided to a halt, the gentle whir of the engine fading into the hushed elegance of the surroundings. Su Xiao Xiao peered out the window, her breath catching in her throat. Towering gates, wrought in intricate designs, stood sentinel before a sprawling estate. Beyond, glimpses of manicured gardens and a grand, almost palatial structure, hinted at an opulence beyond anything she had ever imagined. A wave of dizziness washed over her, not entirely from the morning sickness that had been plaguing her lately. This wasn't just wealth, it was power, solidified in brick and mortar, radiating an almost palpable aura of influence. What am I doing here? She thought, her hand instinctively going to her still flat abdomen. The tiny lives within her, the source of so much turmoil, felt impossibly real in this unreal setting. The chauffeur opened the door, the soft click echoing in the stillness. "Miss Sue," he murmured, gesturing towards the house. Xiao Xiao stepped out, the polished marble of the driveway cool beneath her shoes. Each step felt heavy, as if she were wading through a dream tinged with both fascination and a growing unease. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine, a cloying sweetness that seemed to mirror the unsettling ambiguity of her situation. Inside, the grandeur intensified. Crystal chandeliers cast shimmering rainbows across polished floors, and antique furnishings whispered stories of generations past. A silent servant, his face impassive, gestured for her to follow. Xiao Xiao trailed behind, her gaze flitting across the elaborate tapestries and priceless artwork adorning the walls. It was a world away from her simple apartment, from the bustling campus, from everything she had ever known. "This isn't real," a voice echoed in her mind, yet the weight of the silence, the sheer tangible reality of the luxury surrounding her, argued otherwise. They reached a pair of imposing double doors. The servant paused, then opened them with a flourish. Xiao Xiao stepped into a spacious study, the air heavy with the scent of old leather and sandalwood. A figure stood by the window, his back turned, gazing out at the expansive grounds. He was tall, his posture radiating an air of quiet command. Even before he turned, Xiao Xiao felt a tremor of recognition, a strange sense of familiarity that sent a shiver down her spine. He turned slowly, his gaze meeting hers. The faintest hint of a smile played on his lips, a smile that seemed to hold both warmth and an unreadable depth. "Ah, this is my home," he said, his voice a low rumble that resonated in the stillness. Xiao Xiao stared, her mind struggling to reconcile the image before her with the memories that flickered in her mind. It couldn't be, could it? "Jiu Jiu Yi," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. He chuckled, a sound that sent a strange mix of comfort and trepidation through her. "A name for the shadows," he said, stepping closer. "But here, in the light, you can call me Jihan. Fu Jihan." The world tilted on its axis. Fu Jihan. The name reverberated in her mind, connecting disparate pieces of a puzzle she hadn't even realized she was trying to solve. The enigmatic Jiu Yi, the powerful Fu Jihan, they were one and the same. She swayed slightly, her hand instinctively going to her stomach. "Oh my God," she breathed, the words barely audible. This is too luxurious." The phrase, uttered in a daze, was a pale reflection of the whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. Disbelief, confusion, a touch of fear, and a strange, unsettling flicker of relief. He watched her, his gaze intense, as if searching for something in her eyes. He stepped closer still, the space between them shrinking until she could almost feel the warmth radiating from him. "It is ours," he said softly, his hand reaching out to gently touch her cheek. "Yours and mine." The words hung in the air, charged with an unspoken intimacy, a shared secret that had suddenly been brought into the harsh light of day. Xiao Xiao's heart hammered against her ribs, the reality of the situation crashing down upon her with the force of a tidal wave. Her relationship with Jiu Yi, a clandestine affair shrouded in mystery, was now inextricably linked to the powerful Fu family, a family whose influence stretched far and wide, a family she had only glimpsed from the periphery. The implications were staggering. Her pregnancy, once a private matter, a secret shared only between her and the man she knew as Jiu Yi, was now a potential scandal waiting to explode. Shen Yuchen's face flashed before her eyes, contorted with jealousy and rage. Qiao Shiyu's sly smile, her whispered words of ambition, echoed in her ears. They had been playing a game, a dangerous game, and she had been a pawn, unwittingly caught in their crosshairs. But now, with the revelation of Jiu Ye's identity, the game had changed. The board had been flipped, the pieces scattered, and she, along with Fu Jihan, was at the center of a storm that threatened to engulf them both. The rain hammered against the windowpane, a relentless rhythm echoing the turmoil in Su Xiaoxiao's heart. She traced the condensation with a trembling finger, the blurry cityscape outside mirroring the confusion within her. Quadruplets. The word still felt alien, a fantastical concept that had violently ripped her from the predictable trajectory of her life. The doctor's words replayed in her mind, each syllable a hammer blow against her carefully constructed composure. She thought of Jiu Yi, the enigmatic man who had stolen her heart and unknowingly set this chaotic chain of events in motion. Where was he now? Did he even know? Across the city, in the sterile confines of Fu Jihan's office, the air crackled with tension. He stared at the report in his hands, each line a damning indictment. Qiao Shiyu. He had trusted her, relied on her, and she had betrayed him. Betrayed them both. His jaw tightened, a muscle twitching beneath his cheekbone. Looks like someone wants to harm him, he said, his voice low and dangerous, each word laced with ice. The private investigator standing before him shifted uneasily, the weight of Fu Jihan's displeasure settling heavily in the room. Jihan's thoughts, however, were not solely on Qiao Shiyu's treachery. They were on Xiao Xiao. He needed to protect her, shield her from the storm that was brewing. The thought of her, alone and vulnerable, tightened his chest with a painful urgency. Shen Yuchen paced his opulent study, the Persian rug muffling the sound of his agitated steps. He had underestimated Su Xiaoxiao. Her quiet strength, her unyielding spirit, it irritated him. He had offered her everything, and she had refused. His pride, his carefully crafted image of control, had been shattered. Qiao Shiyu saved you, he muttered to himself, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He had used Qiao Shiyu, exploited her ambition, and now her actions were threatening to unravel everything. The realization brought a flicker of unease, a prickle of fear beneath his arrogant facade. He had unleashed a force he couldn't control. Meanwhile, Qiao Shiyu sat perched on the edge of a velvet chaise lounge, a glass of champagne trembling in her manicured hand. The events of the past few days had unfolded with a dizzying speed. She had gambled, and she had won, hadn't she? The smirk playing on her lips faltered as a wave of doubt washed over her. Fu Jihan's gaze had been glacial, his words clipped and devoid of warmth. Had he suspected something? She pushed the thought away, taking a long gulp of champagne. It was too late to turn back now. She had climbed too high, sacrificed too much. The city lights blurred into streaks of color as Fu Jihan's car cut through the night. He couldn't shake the image of Xiao Xiao, her face pale and drawn, the fear in her eyes a stark contrast to her usual vibrant spirit. He had to reach her, explain everything, reassure her. His phone buzzed, a message flashing across the screen. "Someone wants to buy your life with money," it read. His grip tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. He knew who was behind this. He knew, and he would make them pay. Xiao Xiao sat in the dimly lit hospital waiting room, her hand protectively cradling her stomach. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of medical equipment. The fear, the uncertainty, it was a suffocating weight. She closed her eyes, trying to conjure Jiu Ye's face, his reassuring presence. She needed him. She needed his strength, his unwavering support. Suddenly, the door burst open, and Fu Jihan stood there, his face etched with concern. "Xiao Xiao," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, his hands reaching for her, hesitant yet desperate. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and relief. He knelt before her, his gaze locking with hers. "It was me, Xiao Xiao," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Jiu Yi, it was me all along." The revelation hung in the air, thick and heavy, like the storm raging outside. He saw the shock ripple through her, the disbelief etched on her features. He reached out, his fingers gently brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "I should have told you sooner. I wanted to protect you." Her mind raced, trying to process the information. Jiu Yi Fu Jihan. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The secret meetings, the cryptic messages, the unwavering support. It had been him all along. He explained everything, the conspiracies, the betrayals, the lengths he had gone to keep her safe. He confessed his fear, his desperation to protect her and their unborn children. He laid bare his soul, his vulnerabilities exposed, his love for her a raw, pulsating force. Xiao Xiao listened, her heart aching with a mixture of pain and understanding. She had been so blind, so caught up in her own fear and confusion that she hadn't seen the truth staring her in the face. As the dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, a new understanding settled between them. The storm had passed, leaving behind a fragile peace. The road ahead would be long and arduous, filled with challenges and uncertainties. But together, they would face it. Together, they would protect their family, their love, their future. The rain had stopped and a single ray of sunlight pierced through the clouds, illuminating the path forward. The sterile scent of antiseptic hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within Su Xiao Xiao. A sharp, stabbing pain tore through her lower abdomen, doubling her over. The pristine white walls of the hospital room seemed to mock her vulnerability. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Just a few short weeks ago, she was a carefree graduate, her future a blank canvas. Now, it was smeared with uncertainty and fear, the vibrant colors replaced by the dull ache of reality. "Nurse," she managed to gasp, her voice thin and reedy. The world swam in a dizzying haze. The crisp rustle of starched uniforms and hurried footsteps echoed in the hallway. Faces blurred above her, voices murmuring words she couldn't grasp. A prick in her arm, the cool rush of saline, then blessed oblivion. When Xiao Xiao surfaced, the pain had subsided, replaced by a chilling emptiness. The rhythmic beeping of a machine filled the silence, a relentless reminder of her precarious situation. Her hand instinctively went to her abdomen, searching for a reassurance she wasn't sure she'd find. "My babies are they?" The thought remained unfinished, a knot of fear constricting her throat. A figure loomed into her field of vision. Fu Jihan. His face, usually an impassive mask, was etched with a concern that surprised her. He hadn't been kind, not really. His words, though few, had been laced with suspicion, accusation even. Yet, here he was, his hand hovering near hers, a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. "The doctor will be here soon," he said, his voice low and rough. He hadn't touched her, yet his presence filled the room, a strange mix of comfort and unease. Why does he even care? The question echoed in her mind, a bitter counterpoint to the strange fluttering in her chest. His concern felt genuine, yet she couldn't shake off the memories of his initial coldness, his distrust. Was this another act, another layer of the intricate game he seemed to be playing? Time stretched, each tick of the clock a hammer blow against her fragile hope. Finally, a doctor appeared, his face grave. He spoke in hushed tones, medical jargon washing over her, each phrase a potential death knell. Xiao Xiao's breath hitched, her eyes fixed on the doctor's lips, willing him to say the words she desperately needed to hear. But the words that came were a cruel twist of the knife. "But Miss Sue had a miscarriage," the doctor said, his voice a detached statement of fact. The world shattered around Xiao Xiao, the sterile white walls closing in, suffocating her. "No. No, it can't be." A choked sob escaped her lips, a raw expression of the devastation that ripped through her. Fu Jihan's hand finally found hers, his grip surprisingly firm. His eyes, dark and intense, met hers. "Don't be afraid," he said, his voice cutting through the fog of despair. "The child is still there." Xiao Xiao stared at him, uncomprehending. The doctor, sensing her confusion, clarified. "It was a close call, Miss Sue. You are carrying quadruplets." The stress triggered contractions, and we lost 1 inch. He paused, his gaze softening. "But the other 3 are stable, though you'll need to remain under observation for a while." Quadruplets? The revelation hit Xiao Xiao with the force of a physical blow. 4 lives. 4 tiny, fragile beings depending on her. The weight of the responsibility pressed down on her, heavy and suffocating. Yet, amidst the fear and uncertainty, a flicker of fierce protectiveness ignited within her. She would fight for them. For their future. Fu Jihan's presence was a steady anchor in the storm of her emotions. He stayed by her side, his silence more comforting than any words could have been. He arranged for the best specialists, oversaw every detail of her care, his actions speaking volumes where his words failed. The initial suspicion she felt towards him began to erode, replaced by a hesitant trust. She couldn't explain it, this shift in her perception. Perhaps it was the shared vulnerability, the unspoken bond forged in the crucible of fear and loss. Later, when the initial shock had subsided and the rhythmic beeping of the machines had become a lullaby, Xiao Xiao found herself studying Fu Jihan's face. The harsh lines seemed softened, the coldness in his eyes replaced by a warmth she hadn't seen before. He caught her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Who are you, Fu Jihan?" The question hung unspoken between them, a silent acknowledgement of the complexities that bound them together. The news of Xiao Xiao's near miscarriage and the revelation of her quadruplets sent ripples through both the Fu and Shen families. Xiao Xiu's carefully constructed facade crumbled, replaced by a venomous rage. Her plans, her ambitions, threatened by this unexpected turn of events. Shen Yuchen, consumed by jealousy and a desperate need to control, spiraled further into his web of deceit, his actions becoming increasingly erratic. Within the Fu household, Fu Jihan's mother, a woman of formidable power and influence, reacted with a mixture of shock and concern. Her initial disapproval of Xiao Xiao softened, replaced by a pragmatic acceptance. The continuation of the Fu lineage, especially with not 1 but 3 heirs, outweighed any personal reservations she might have harbored. The intricate dance of power and influence within the families intensified, the stakes higher than ever before. Xiao Xiao, caught in the center of this maelstrom, knew she was playing a game she didn't fully understand. Yet, she also knew, with a certainty that surprised even herself, that she wouldn't be a pawn. She would protect her children, uncover the truth, and forge her own destiny, regardless of the cost. The loss she had suffered, the fear she had endured, had ignited a strength within her, a resilience she hadn't known she possessed. The sterile white walls of the hospital room no longer mocked her vulnerability. They were now a sanctuary, a place of healing and resolve, where a new chapter of her life was beginning. The Grand Fu residence felt both suffocating and strangely comforting. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, a silent ballet against the backdrop of opulent furnishings. Xiao Xiao traced the intricate carvings on the mahogany table, her touch hesitant. She was a guest, an intruder in this palace of marble and silk. Yet, Jihan's words echoed in her mind, a persistent reassurance, a promise of belonging. From today on, you live in my house. Her heart fluttered, a fragile bird trapped between apprehension and a burgeoning hope. Could she truly find a home within these imposing walls? Jihan watched her from across the room, his gaze a complex tapestry of protectiveness and a tenderness that still startled her. He had shed the icy demeanor of their initial encounters, revealing a man of profound depth and unwavering resolve. He moved with an effortless grace, the master of his domain, yet his eyes held a vulnerability when they rested on her, a silent plea for acceptance that mirrored her own. The transition hadn't been easy. The whispers, the curious glances from the household staff, the subtle disapproval etched on the face of Jihan's mother, each interaction was a pinprick, a reminder of her precarious position. But Jihan, a fortress against the tide of doubt, had remained steadfast. His public declarations of affection, his unwavering support, were slowly chipping away at the wall of resistance. "I only love Xiao Xiao in this life," he had announced at a family dinner, his voice resonating with an intensity that left no room for argument. Xiao Xiao had felt a blush creep up her neck, a mixture of embarrassment and a strange sense of triumph. She was not just a fleeting fancy, she was his chosen one. The acceptance, however grudging, from Jihan's mother had been a turning point. The older woman, a formidable matriarch, had initially viewed Xiao Xiao with thinly veiled disdain. But Jihan's unwavering devotion, coupled with Xiao Xiao's own quiet strength and the undeniable evidence of her growing belly, had gradually softened her stance. There were still moments of tension, a lingering frost in her polite smiles, but the thawing had begun. The mystery surrounding Jihan's father's death continued to cast a long shadow over the Fu family. Whispers and rumors clung to the opulent furniture like cobwebs, hinting at betrayals and hidden agendas. Jihan, his jaw tight with suppressed grief and anger, was determined to uncover the truth. Late at night, Xiao Xiao would find him hunched over documents in his study, the lines of his face etched with fatigue and a steely determination. She would silently place a cup of tea beside him, her touch a wordless expression of comfort and support. He would look up, his eyes filled with a gratitude that warmed her to the core. They were partners in this unspoken battle, bound not just by their growing love but also by the shared desire for justice. Xiao Xiao's career, surprisingly, flourished amidst the turmoil. The skills she had honed in university, initially overshadowed by her personal circumstances, began to shine. The challenge of her work, the intellectual stimulation, provided a much-needed anchor in the swirling currents of her new life. She poured her energy into her projects, finding solace in the concrete reality of deadlines and deliverables. Jihan, ever supportive, encouraged her ambitions, celebrating her successes with a quiet pride that filled her with a profound sense of accomplishment. One evening, while walking through the manicured gardens of the Fu estate, Jihan stopped, his hand gently resting on Xiao Xiao's burgeoning belly. "They're going to have a good life," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Xiao Xiao leaned into him, her heart swelling with a love so profound it ached. "They will," she whispered, her voice choked with unshed tears. "Because of you." He turned to her, his eyes searching hers. "Because of us," he corrected, his thumb gently stroking her cheek. "We will face everything together." In that moment, amidst the fragrant blossoms and the gentle hum of the evening cicadas, Xiao Xiao felt a profound sense of peace. The fear and uncertainty that had plagued her for so long seemed to dissipate, replaced by a quiet certainty, a conviction that they could weather any storm. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly falling into place. Information gleaned from hushed conversations, cryptic documents discovered in Jihan's father's study, and the subtle shifts in the behavior of certain family members began to paint a clearer picture of the events surrounding his death. A network of deceit and betrayal was slowly unraveling, revealing a conspiracy that reached the highest echelons of both the Fu and Shen families. Shen Yuchen, consumed by jealousy and a desperate desire to control Xiao Xiao, had played a key role in the machinations. Xiao Xiu, her ambitions masked beneath a veneer of innocence, had been his willing accomplice. The confrontation, when it came, was swift and brutal. Jihan, armed with irrefutable evidence, exposed their treachery in a family meeting that crackled with tension. The accusations flew, the denials rang hollow, and the carefully constructed facades of respectability crumbled. Xiao Xiao watched, her heart pounding in her chest, as Jihan systematically dismantled their lies, his voice resonating with righteous anger. "The bad guys will be punished," he declared, his gaze unwavering. The aftermath was a whirlwind of activity. Legal proceedings were initiated, reputations were tarnished, and the balance of power within the families shifted dramatically. Xiao Xiao, no longer the vulnerable outsider, stood by Jihan's side, a pillar of strength and support. She had found her voice, her purpose, within the heart of this tumultuous family. The Grand Fu residence, once a symbol of her insecurity, now felt like a sanctuary. The sunlight streaming through the windows no longer illuminated an intruder but a cherished member of the family. The dust motes still danced in the air, but now, they seemed to celebrate a new beginning, a future forged in love, resilience, and the unwavering pursuit of truth. The whispers had faded, replaced by a respectful silence, an acknowledgement of her place, her strength, her unwavering love for the man who had claimed her heart and given her a home. The fluorescent lights of the Empire Group office hummed, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within Su Xiaoxiao. Each click of her heels against the polished marble floor echoed in the unnervingly quiet hallway. She gripped the folder containing irrefutable evidence, her knuckles white against the manila. This wasn't how she envisioned her day, her week, her life. Just a few weeks ago, she was a fresh graduate, navigating the complexities of a new job. Now, she was walking into a battle, armed with nothing but her wits and the burning desire to protect her future, the future of her children. The thought sent a wave of dizziness, a strange mixture of fear and fierce protectiveness. She pressed a hand to her still flat stomach, a silent promise. The whispers started the moment she stepped onto the floor. Heads turned, eyes followed her every move. She could feel the weight of their gazes, their speculations, their judgments. Some were laced with pity, others with barely concealed glee. Xiao Xiao's lips thinned into a tight line. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Not today. Xiao Xiu, perched on the edge of her desk like a preening peacock, offered a saccharine smile. "Su Xiao," she chirped, her voice laced with false concern, "you're back. We all thought, well, you know." The unspoken words hung heavy in the air. "You were fired, right? Disappointed?" Xiao Xiao asked, her voice calm, betraying none of the turmoil within. Xiao Xiu's smile faltered. This wasn't the broken, defeated Xiao Xiao she expected. Before Xiao Xiu could recover, Xiao Xiao continued, her voice rising slightly, just enough to carry across the open office. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." The murmur of the office intensified. Xiao Xiao walked directly to the head of the long table in the conference room, the very room where just days ago she'd been humiliated and dismissed. She placed the folder down with a decisive thud. The sound, amplified in the sudden silence, seemed to reverberate through the room, a physical manifestation of the shift in power. Xiao Xiu's carefully constructed composure finally cracked, a flicker of unease in her eyes. She glanced nervously towards the door, expecting, perhaps, a different authority figure to enter, to reprimand Xiao Xiao, to reinforce the existing hierarchy. But no one came. "As some of you may know," Xiao Xiao began, her gaze sweeping across the faces in the room, each a mask of varying degrees of shock and confusion, "there have been allegations made against me. Allegations that I vehemently deny." Her voice was steady, unwavering. She could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, sharpening her senses, pushing aside the lingering nausea that had plagued her mornings. "I have here," she tapped the folder, "proof that those allegations were fabricated. Proof of a deliberate and malicious attempt to sabotage my career, to discredit my character. The blood drained from Xiao Shiyu's face. She opened her mouth to speak, to interrupt, to deny, but the words caught in her throat. Just then, the door opened and Fu Jihan walked in. His presence filled the room, a palpable force that silenced the remaining whispers. He didn't speak, his gaze fixed on Xiao Xiao. In his eyes, she saw not the cold, distant businessman she'd first encountered, but something else. Understanding. Support. A strange, unfamiliar warmth bloomed in her chest. I believe, Fu Jihan's voice resonated through the room, low and authoritative, Miss Su has something to say. He didn't glance at anyone else, his focus solely on Xiao Xiao. A ripple of shock went through the room. The whispers started anew, even more frantic now. Xiao Shiyu stared at Fu Jihan, her face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. Xiao Xiao took a deep breath. This was it. I am the boss of this company, she declared, her voice ringing with newfound confidence. The room fell silent. Every eye was on her, wide with disbelief. The air thickened with anticipation, hanging heavy with unspoken questions. Xiao Xiao allowed the silence to stretch, letting the weight of her words sink in. Effective immediately, she continued, her voice unwavering, Xiao Shiyu is terminated for gross misconduct and breach of company confidentiality. Xiao Shiyu gasped, a strangled sound of protest. She opened her mouth to speak, but Fu Jihan cut her off with a single, sharp look. Security will escort you out, he said, his voice cold and dismissive. Two guards appeared as if from nowhere, flanking Xiao Shiyu. She looked from Fu Jihan to Xiao Xiao, her face a contorted mask of rage and humiliation. But she knew she was beaten. Defeated. As the guards led Xiao Shiyu away, a strange calmness settled over Xiao Xiao. She'd won. She'd protected herself, her future, the future of her children. But the victory felt hollow, tinged with a weariness that went beyond the exhaustion of the past few weeks. She turned to Fu Jihan, her gaze searching his. I officially resign, she said, her voice soft but firm. The words hung in the air, a stark contrast to the drama that had just unfolded. Fu Jihan's expression remained unreadable, but a flicker of something surprise, perhaps, or even disappointment, crossed his eyes. The room held its breath. The ending, it seemed, was yet to be written. The air in the Fu family mansion crackled with a tension so thick it was almost palpable. Xiao Xiao stood in the opulent living room, the ornate chandeliers casting a cold, unforgiving light on the scene unfolding before her. Her hand instinctively rested on her swollen belly, a protective gesture that belied the turmoil churning within her. Just hours ago, she had been a pawn in a game she barely understood. Now, the players were revealing their hands, and the stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined. Xiao Shiyu's carefully constructed facade had crumbled, revealing a woman driven by ambition and a chilling disregard for human life. Each revelation, each whispered accusation, struck Xiao Xiao like a physical blow. How could I have been so blind? She thought, the nausea rising in her throat not entirely due to her pregnancy. How could I have trusted her? Xiao Shiyu's voice, once honeyed and soothing, now dripped with venom as she lashed out at Xin Yuchen. He, in turn, met her accusations with a petulant defiance that bordered on hysteria. The Shen family's reputation, their carefully cultivated image of power and respectability, was disintegrating before their eyes. Xiao Xiao watched the spectacle with a detached fascination, her mind struggling to reconcile the man before her with the one she had once thought she knew. Shen Yuchen, the charming, albeit spoiled, heir apparent, now looked like a cornered animal, his eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. Across the room, Fu Jihan's mother sat ramrod straight, her face a mask of composed fury. The revelation of Xiao Shiyu's scheme, a tangled web of lies and manipulation that threatened to unravel the delicate balance of power between the Fu and Shen families, had shaken her to her core. Xiao Xiao could almost feel the woman's icy disapproval radiating across the room. Does she still blame me? She wondered, the familiar pang of insecurity tightening her chest. Does she think I'm part of this charade? Jihan's voice cut through the escalating chaos, sharp and commanding. He stood beside her, a silent pillar of strength in the swirling vortex of accusations and recriminations. He hadn't left her side since the truth began to unravel, his presence a tangible reassurance in the face of the mounting uncertainties. Yet, a gulf remained between them, a chasm of unspoken words and unresolved emotions. Xiao Xiao longed to reach out, to bridge the distance that separated them, but she hesitated, unsure of her footing in this treacherous new landscape. Enough, Jihan commanded, his voice resonating with an authority that silenced the room. He turned to Xiao Xiao, his gaze intense, searching. There's something you need to know. His words hung in the air, pregnant with unspoken meaning. Xiao Xiao's heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. What is it? She thought, a shiver tracing its way down her spine. What else can there be? He took a step closer, his hand reaching out to gently cup her cheek. The warmth of his touch sent a wave of conflicting emotions washing over her: relief, confusion, a flicker of hope. I know who killed your father, he said, his voice low and steady. The words hit Xiao Xiao like a thunderclap, the fragments of her past crashing together with the tumultuous present. Her father's death, a mystery that had haunted her for years, was suddenly within reach, a tangible piece of the puzzle that had shaped her life. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and she swayed slightly. Jihan's arm tightened around her waist, steadying her. It was Qiao Xiu, he continued, his voice laced with a controlled fury that sent a chill down Xiao Xiao's spine. She orchestrated the accident to frame your uncle and seize control of his company. She used you, Xiao Xiao. She used all of us. Xiao Xiao stared at him, her mind reeling from the revelation. Xiao Xiu, the woman she had considered a friend, a confidant, had been the architect of her family's ruin. The betrayal cut deep, a jagged wound that tore through the layers of grief and confusion she had carried for so long. I don't understand, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Why? Jihan's eyes darkened, the warmth replaced by a chilling coldness that made Xiao Xiao flinch. Greed, he said simply. Power. She wanted it all, and she was willing to do anything to get it. He turned his gaze towards Qiao Xiu, who stood frozen, her face ashen. I will make her live a life worse than death, he vowed, his voice a low growl that resonated with a terrifying intensity. In that moment, Xiao Xiao saw a glimpse of the man behind the mask, the ruthless power broker who commanded empires and controlled destinies. It was a side of him she had never seen before, a side that both terrified and strangely exhilarated her. He was not the gentle, caring man who had held her hand through her pregnancy scares, not the tender lover who had whispered sweet nothings in her ear. This was Jiu Yi, the Nine Master, the man whose name whispered in hushed tones evoked both fear and respect. And then, another revelation, even more shocking than the last. Jihan turned back to her, his gaze softening, the coldness melting away as quickly as it had appeared. There's something else, he said, his voice regaining its warmth. Something I should have told you a long time ago. He took a deep breath, his eyes locking with hers. I am Jiu Yi. The words hung in the air, suspended between them like a fragile thread. Xiao Xiao stared at him, her mind struggling to process the information. Jiu Yi, the enigmatic figure who had loomed so large in her life, the man she had both feared and admired, was standing before her, his hand on her cheek, his eyes filled with a love that took her breath away. A slow smile spread across her face, a mixture of disbelief and wonder. All the pieces of the puzzle finally clicked into place. The secret meetings, the cryptic messages, the unwavering support, it all made sense now. He had been there all along, protecting her, guiding her, loving her from the shadows. "I know," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I've known for a while." He chuckled, the sound a low rumble in his chest. "Of course you did," he said, his eyes twinkling with amusement. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, a gesture of tenderness that spoke volumes. "You're too smart for your own good, Xiao Xiao." The tension in the room had dissipated, replaced by a sense of quiet understanding. The future stretched before them, uncertain yet filled with promise. They had weathered the storm, and they had emerged stronger, their bond forged in the crucible of deceit and betrayal. The Shen family, their power diminished, their reputation tarnished, retreated, leaving behind the wreckage of their ambition. Xiao Xiu was taken away, her face a mask of defeat, her reign of manipulation finally at an end. As Xiao Xiao stood beside Jihan, her hand resting on her swollen belly, she knew that they would face whatever came next together. They had each other, and that was all that mattered.